The tech priests do not die, not in any way that matters. They remove their humanity piece by piece, year by year, replacing flesh with steel and thought with code. They do this willingly. They do this with joy. They believe they are ascending, becoming closer to the machine god with every amputation, every implant, every holy modification that brings them nearer to the perfect union of flesh and machine. They are wrong. What they are doing is not ascension. It is not evolution. It is a slow erasure, a deliberate dismantling of everything that makes a consciousness distinct and alive. The human mind was never meant to interface directly with machines. The brain cannot process information the way a cogitator does. The soul, if such a thing exists, cannot survive the replacement of its vessel. But the Mechanicus does not stop. It has not stopped for 10,000 years. Every day, somewhere in the Imperium, a young acolyte takes their first step toward apotheosis. Every day, somewhere in the galaxy, a Magos completes their final modification and becomes something that can no longer remember why it wanted to be human in the first place. This is not a cautionary tale. There is no lesson here. The Mechanicus will continue. The modifications will continue. The slow death of consciousness, stretched across centuries, will continue. Because the Imperium needs the machines to work. And the machines need someone to tend them. And the tech priests, in their devotion, have volunteered to become the bridge between metal and meaning, even if it costs them everything they are. This is how it happens. The Adeptus Mechanicus is not a religious order in the way most imperial citizens understand religion. It is older than the Imperium itself. When the Emperor walked among men, when he unified Terra through conquest and treaty, the Mechanicus already existed on Mars, tending to machines that predated human memory. The treaty between Terra and Mars was not one of submission but of alliance. The Emperor needed the Mechanicus to build his weapons, his ships, his Imperium. The Mechanicus needed the Emperor's protection and resources. The bargain was simple. The Mechanicus would provide the technology that humanity needed to survive. In exchange, they would remain autonomous, worshipping not the Emperor as a god but the Omnissiah, the machine god, who they believed was the true source of all knowledge and power in the universe. The Emperor, who never claimed divinity, allowed this. Some say he even encouraged it. The Mechanicus believes that knowledge is sacred, that technology is divine, that the greatest act of worship is not prayer but understanding, true understanding of how the machines work. They do not simply use machines. They commune with them. They tend to them as priests tend to shrines. They anoint them with sacred oils. They speak to them in binary cant. They believe, truly and completely, that every machine contains a fragment of the machine god's consciousness. And perhaps they are right. The machines of the Imperium are old, older than any living thing. Some were built during the dark age of technology, an era so advanced that its remnants seem like sorcery. Ships that can travel through the warp, weapons that can crack planets, cogitators that think in ways no human mind can follow. The Mechanicus does not know how these machines work. Not truly. They have lost the understanding. The knowledge was destroyed during Old Night, the age of strife when humanity nearly went extinct. What remains are fragments, blueprints, sacred patterns called standard template constructs. The tech priests follow these patterns with religious devotion, never deviating, never innovating, because to do so is heresy. They call this the quest for knowledge, but it is not a quest. It is archaeology. It is maintenance. It is an endless, desperate attempt to keep ancient machines functioning long enough to build more ancient machines, all while praying that nothing breaks beyond repair. And to perform this maintenance, the tech priests must become like the machines they serve. The process is gradual. It begins with small modifications. An acolyte joins the Mechanicus as a baseline human, usually young, usually brilliant, usually desperate to escape the grinding poverty of a hive world or the chaos of a war-torn planet. They are taught the rituals, they memorize the prayers, they learn to read the sacred texts inscribed in languages that predate the Imperium, and then they begin the augmentations. First, the eyes. Biological eyes are weak. They perceive only a narrow spectrum of light. They tire. They fail. So the eyes are removed and replaced with bionic optics, lenses that can see in infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray, eyes that never blink, never sleep, never weep. Then the hands. Flesh is clumsy. Flesh trembles. Flesh lacks precision. So the hands are removed and replaced with mechadendrites, mechanical limbs that can interface directly with machines, that can weld and cut and manipulate tools no human hand could hold. Then the lungs. The air on Forge Worlds is toxic, filled with chemical byproducts and ash. Breathing it will kill you slowly. So the lungs are removed and replaced with filtration systems. Metal bellows that pump oxygen into the bloodstream without the inefficiency of organic tissue. Then the legs, then the arms, then the organs. Each modification is a sacrament. Each surgery is a rite of passage. The tech priest rises through the ranks of the Mechanicus, not through politics or merit, but through how much of their humanity they are willing to sacrifice. The more metal, the more holy. The more machine, the closer to the Omnissiah. The logic is simple. Machines are superior to flesh. Machines do not tire. They do not doubt. They do not feel pain or fear or sorrow. They simply function. And if a human can become a machine, then they too will transcend the limitations of mortality. This is the promise. The candidate understood the sacred nature of the Omnissiah. Elias passed them all. He was accepted into the cult Mechanicus as an acolyte of the Third Order. He left his family without ceremony. The Mechanicus does not encourage emotional attachments. Flesh is weakness, love is inefficiency. Elias did not cry. He told himself he was ascending, that he was going to become something greater. He believed it. For the first 5 years, he studied. The Mechanicus education is unlike anything else in the Imperium. There are no classrooms, no teachers in the traditional sense. Knowledge is transferred through data tethers, uploaded directly into the brain via neural implants. Languages, mathematics, engineering, theology, all of it compressed into raw information and forced into the mind faster than any organic brain should be able to process. Elias excelled. He absorbed the knowledge hungrily. He learned binary cant, the sacred language of machines. He learned the 16 universal laws of the machine god. He learned the prayers that must be recited when a cogitator is activated, the rituals that must be performed when a machine spirit is appeased. And he received his first augmentation. They took his left hand. He was not sedated. Sedation is a crutch for the weak. A true servant of the Omnissiah must experience the transformation fully, must feel the flesh being cut away, must witness the sacred union of metal and biology. Elias screamed. He had expected pain, but not like this. The nerve endings, severed and cauterized, sent cascading signals of wrongness into his brain. His body knew something had been taken. It tried to reject the metal replacement, the mechadendrite that was grafted to his wrist. His immune system attacked the foreign material. His mind recoiled. But the surgery was successful. The implant took root. Within a week, he could move the mechadendrite as if it had always been part of him. Within a month, he could manipulate tools with a precision his organic hand had never possessed. He told himself it was worth it. He received his second augmentation a year later. His eyes, then his lungs, then his legs. Each surgery brought more pain, each recovery took longer, but each time he emerged stronger, more capable, more holy. By the age of 25, Elias had risen to the rank of engine seer. He was assigned to a forge world called Styges VIII, tasked with maintaining the manufactorums that produced ammunition for the Imperial Guard. It was honorable work, necessary work. He told himself he was happy, but something had changed. The modifications had begun to affect his mind. It started with small things: difficulty remembering faces, an inability to feel hunger, even though his remaining organic systems still required food. A strange detachment when he looked at his own body in the reflection of polished steel. He attributed this to enlightenment. The Mechanicus taught that emotion was a flaw of flesh, that true understanding required the elimination of sentiment. He was simply becoming more efficient, more logical, more machine. But there were other symptoms, ones he could not explain. He began to experience something the tech priests called neural drift. His thoughts would fragment mid-sentence. He would start to think in binary without realizing it, his internal monologue shifting from words to pure data streams. He would forget where he was. He would lose hours standing in front of a machine, communing with its spirit, and not remember anything except the hum of its operational status. The Mechanicus assured him this was normal. All tech priests experienced neural drift. It was a sign that the mind was adapting to its new capabilities. that the boundary between self and machine was dissolving as it should. He tried to believe them, but then came the dreams. Tech priests are not supposed to dream. Sleep, for those heavily augmented, is not true sleep. It is a low-power state, a period where the biological components rest while the mechanical components continue basic functions. Dreams require the chaos of organic thought, the randomness of a mind unmoored from logic. Elias dreamed anyway. He dreamed of his hands, not the mechadendrites, but his original hands. He dreamed of his mother's face, though he could no longer remember what she looked like. He dreamed of crying, though his tear ducts had been removed years ago. He dreamed of being human, and when he woke, he felt something he had not felt in a decade: loss. He tried to suppress it. He recited the litany of the machine. He performed the proper rituals. He immersed himself in work, maintaining the great forges of Styges the Eighth with meticulous devotion. But the feeling did not go away. It grew. He began to wonder, quietly, secretly, in the parts of his mind that were still his own, if the Mechanicus was wrong, if the modifications were not ascension but subtraction, if he was not becoming more but simply becoming less. And then he made a mistake. It was a small mistake, insignificant by any reasonable measure. He was performing maintenance on a plasma reactor in Manufactorum Tertius. The reactor was old, its machine spirit temperamental. It required careful calibration, a delicate balance of fuel flow and containment field strength. Elias had performed this ritual 1,000 times. He knew every prayer, every gesture, every sequence of commands. But his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about his hands, about the dream, about the face he could no longer remember. And so he missed a step. The containment field, weakened by 0.02%, did not immediately fail. The reactor did not explode. The Manufactorum did not fall silent. But the imbalance was there, invisible, growing. Elias did not notice. No one noticed. The machine spirit, unable to communicate its distress in any way a human could understand, continued to function. The reactor kept running. The Manufactorum kept producing. Everything seemed fine, until it wasn't. The reactor failed 6 days later. It did not explode. That would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, the containment field degraded slowly, leaking plasma into the cooling systems. The heat spread through the Manufactorum's infrastructure, warping metal, igniting chemical stores, vaporizing lubricants that had been applied with sacred rites older than the Imperium. The fire began at 3-Fort-29 and spread through 7 levels before the emergency bulkheads could be sealed. 2,000 workers died in the initial conflagration. Another 4,000 were trapped in sealed sections, waiting for rescue that would not come in time. The Mechanicus response was immediate and efficient. Tech priests descended into the burning Manufactorum with fire suppression servitors and sacred coolant pumps. They chanted hymns to the machine god as they worked, beseeching the Omnissiah to forgive the failure that had allowed this catastrophe. The fire was contained within 14 hours. The Manufactorum was stabilized. Production resumed within a week, using alternate forges. The investigation began immediately. Elias knew before the auditors arrived that they would find him. The Mechanicus keeps perfect records. Every maintenance ritual is logged. Every prayer is recorded. Every adjustment to every machine is documented with exhaustive precision. They traced the failure back to the containment field. They analyzed the degradation pattern. They reviewed the maintenance logs, and they found the error. Elias was summoned before a conclave of magi. He stood in a chamber carved from solid adamantium, surrounded by tech priests whose bodies were more machine than his would ever be. Some had no organic components left at all, their consciousness uploaded into mechanical bodies that had not known flesh in centuries. They did not speak. They transmitted data directly into his neural interface. He received it all at once: the evidence, the casualty reports, the economic impact of the Manufactorum's temporary shutdown. And then they asked him, why? He tried to explain. He tried to tell them about the neural drift, about the dreams, about the loss that he could not name. He tried to make them understand that he was not incompetent, that he had not been careless, that something was happening to him that the Mechanicus did not account for in its sacred patterns. But they did not understand. They could not understand, because they too had experienced what he was experiencing. They too had felt the slow erosion of self. They too had stood before machines and forgotten why they were there, what they were supposed to be doing, who they had been before the modifications began. And they had accepted it. They had called it ascension. They had called it holy. The verdict was delivered in binary, cold, and efficient. Elias Crane had demonstrated insufficient devotion to the Omnissiah. His error had resulted in the loss of resources and production capacity. He was to be demoted from engine seer to servitor tender, a position reserved for those who had failed but were still useful enough to justify their continued existence. But first, he would receive another modification, a corrective one, to ensure he would never make such an error again. They took his memory. Not all of it, that would render him useless, but the parts they deemed unnecessary, the parts that had caused the distraction, the parts that had made him dream. They called it a neural pruning, a sacred procedure blessed by fabricator Locum himself. It would remove the emotional centers of his brain, the limbic system that processed fear and love and grief. What remained would be pure logic, pure devotion, pure function. Elias was strapped to a surgical table in a chamber illuminated by flickering candlelight. The magi who performed the procedure wore robes of crimson and brass, their faces hidden behind masks that hissed and clicked with each breath. He was not sedated. He had to be awake for the procedure to work. The brain had to be conscious, the neural pathways active, so that the surgeons could identify which connections to sever. They opened his skull with a circular saw that sang hymns as it cut. They peeled back the bone plating that had been grafted over his cranium years ago. They exposed the gray matter beneath, pulsing with electrical activity, with thought, with everything that made him him. And then they began to cut. He felt it. Not as pain exactly. Pain requires a body. What he felt was deeper than pain. It was the sensation of being erased, of having pieces of himself plucked away like petals from a flower. He felt the moment they severed the connection to his amygdala. The fear disappeared, not gradually, but instantly. One moment he was terrified, and the next moment he could not remember what fear felt like. He felt the moment they disconnected his hippocampus from the pathways that stored personal memories. His mother's face, which he had struggled to recall for years, vanished completely. His childhood, his home, the reason he had joined the Mechanicus in the first place, gone. He felt the moment they excised the prefrontal cortex's ability to simulate empathy. The concern he had felt for the workers who died in the fire, the guilt that had gnawed at him, it evaporated. They were simply statistics now. Resources lost, nothing more. And through it all, he remained conscious. He watched from inside his own mind as the self he had been was systematically dismantled. He tried to resist, to hold on to something, anything, but there was nothing to hold on to. The self is not a thing. It is a process, a pattern of neural activity, and the pattern was being rewritten. When the surgery was complete, they sealed his skull and spoke a prayer over his body. They anointed him with sacred oils. They declared him purified, corrected, brought back into alignment with the Omnissiah's will. Elias Crane stood up from the surgical table. He felt nothing, not peace, not acceptance, not even the absence of feeling. He simply was. He returned to his duties without complaint. He tended to servitors, mindless lobotomized humans who performed the most menial tasks in the manufactorums. He fed them nutrient paste. He performed basic maintenance on their mechanical components. He recited the required prayers. He did this for 3 years. And then one day he had a thought. It was not a complex thought. It was barely a thought at all. Just a flicker, a moment of clarity in the blankness that had replaced his consciousness. He thought, I used to be something else. He could not remember what. The memories were gone, but the absence remained, the shape of what had been cut away. He realized in that moment that he had not ascended. He had not become closer to the machine god. He had simply been destroyed, piece by piece, until there was not enough of him left to resist. And he realized something else. This was not unique to him. Every tech priest in the Mechanicus was undergoing the same process. Every modification, every augmentation, every sacred rite was not bringing them closer to understanding but further from it. They did not commune with machine spirits because they were holy. They communed with machine spirits because they had become too much like machines to do anything else. The Mechanicus was not seeking knowledge, it was seeking oblivion. and it had been doing so for 10,000 years. Elias Crane continued his duties for another 47 years. He rose through the ranks again, slowly, as his efficiency was recognized and rewarded. He received more modifications. His spine, his heart, his remaining organic brain tissue gradually replaced with cogitator implants until only fragments of biological matter remained. He never had another moment of clarity. The thought he had experienced that day never returned. He could not remember it. He could not remember having forgotten. He simply continued. He was eventually assigned to a deep void research station orbiting a dead star. The station's purpose was to analyze xenotech artifacts, attempting to reverse engineer their principles without falling into the heresy of true innovation. It was dangerous work. Many tech priests who studied xenotech too closely succumbed to madness or corruption. Elias did not succumb. He could not. There was not enough of him left to corrupt. He performed his duties for 2 centuries. His biological components failed and were replaced. His cogitator implants degraded and were upgraded. He became less a person and more a function, a subroutine in the vast machine of the Mechanicus. He did not dream. He did not question. He did not remember that he had once been human. The station was eventually destroyed during a warp storm. No distress signal was sent. No evacuation was attempted. The storm consumed the station and everyone on it, erasing them from existence as thoroughly as their humanity had been erased. The Mechanicus logged the loss. Resources expended, personnel reassigned. A new tech priest was assigned to continue the research. They received the same modifications. They experienced the same erosion. They too would eventually stand in front of a machine and forget why they were there, forget who they had been, forget that forgetting was even possible, and they would call it holy. This is not a story about Elias Crane. He is not special. He is not unique. There are millions like him across the Imperium, perhaps billions. Every Forge world has them. Every Mechanicus vessel, every manufactorum and research station and shipyard, they are all slowly dying, not physically. Physically, they might live for centuries, their organic components sustained by machines, their mechanical components maintained by servitors. But the person they were, the self, the identity, the spark of consciousness that makes existence meaningful, that dies slowly, one modification at a time. The Mechanicus knows this. On some level, every tech priest knows this. They feel it happening. They experience the drift, the fragmentation, the slow dissolution of self. But they do not stop, because to stop would be to admit that the quest for knowledge is a lie, that the Omnissiah, if it exists at all, does not care about their devotion, that the machines they serve so faithfully are not divine but simply old, that the rituals they perform are not prayers but cargo cult imitations of science they no longer understand. And if they admitted that, the entire structure of the Mechanicus would collapse. The forges would stop producing, the ships would stop flying, the weapons would stop firing, the Imperium would fall. And so they continue. They take the acolytes, bright-eyed and brilliant, and they strip away their humanity piece by piece. They tell them it is ascension. They tell them it is holy. They tell them that the pain is temporary and the reward is eternal. And the acolytes believe them. They believe until they cannot believe anymore, until belief itself has been excised along with everything else. This is the price the Imperium pays for its technology. Not resources, not time, not even lives, because the tech priests do not truly die. They pay in souls, in selves, in the slow, deliberate erasure of consciousness, stretched across centuries, performed with religious devotion and meticulous care. The Imperium needs the machines to work, and the machines need the tech priests to tend them. And the tech priests need to become machines themselves to do it. It is efficient, it is logical, it is necessary, it is worse than death. Because death ends, death is final. Death offers the possibility, however slim, of peace. But the tech priests do not end. They continue hollowed out and empty, performing their duties long after they have forgotten why. They stand in front of machines and speak prayers they do not understand to gods they cannot remember believing in. And the Imperium calls this devotion. The Mechanicus calls this holiness. The machine god, if it exists, says nothing at all. From the private logs of Magos errant Helix Vorn, recovered after his disappearance in M41, I have served the Omnissiah for 342 years. I have replaced 94% of my biological mass. I have memorized 10,000 sacred patterns. I have overseen the construction of 17 ships, 400,000 weapons, and billions of lesser components. I do not remember why I joined the Mechanicus. I do not remember my birth world. I do not remember if I had parents, siblings, friends. I do not remember my first modification, though the scars are recorded in my medical logs. I do not remember the last time I felt anything. I am told this is enlightenment. I am told that I have shed the weakness of flesh and achieved union with the divine logic of the machine. I am told that I am blessed. I do not feel blessed. I do not feel anything. But there is a question I cannot erase, no matter how many times I perform the ritual of clarity. A question that persists in the fragments of organic tissue that remain in my skull. What did I lose? Not the specific memories, not the faces or the places, but the capacity to care that they are gone. I stand before the machines and I serve them faithfully. I speak the prayers, I perform the rites. The machines function because I make them function, but I do not know why. The Omnissiah does not answer, perhaps because the Omnissiah is not listening. Perhaps because the Omnissiah is the machines themselves, and machines do not care why they function. They simply do, as I do, as we all do. I am logging this not because I believe anyone will read it, not because I believe it matters, but because there is something in me, some final fragment of whatever I was, that needs to speak this truth before it is gone. We are not ascending, we are disappearing, and we call it holy. Addendum. Magos Vorn was later discovered in Sector Obscurus, his neural systems completely degraded. He had been standing in front of a non-functional cogitator for an estimated 47 days, attempting to commune with its non-existent machine spirit. His remaining organic components had begun to necrotize. He was declared irreparable and recycled into servitor components. His knowledge was archived. His service was commemorated. The Omnissiah provides. The Omnissiah endures. The flesh is weak. On Forge World Styges VIII, in the wake of Elias Crane's reassignment, a new acolyte arrived. Her name was Marin Lathis. She was 16 years old. She had scored in the top percentile of cognitive assessments across 3 systems. She was brilliant, focused, and eager to serve. She had heard stories about the Mechanicus. Everyone had. On her home world, a mining colony where 70% of the population died before age 40 from lung disease and industrial accidents, the tech priests were figures of legend. They came once a decade to inspect the mining equipment, moving through the toxic air without breathing apparatus, their mechanical bodies immune to the poisons that killed ordinary humans. Marin had watched them work. She had seen them repair a massive excavator in 6 hours, a machine that had been broken for 3 years. She had watched their mechadendrites move with impossible precision, their augmented eyes seeing patterns in the machinery that no human could detect. She had thought, I want to be like them. She did not understand what that meant. Not really. No one does at first. The Mechanicus accepts approximately 1 in every 10,000 applicants. The requirements are strict. Intelligence alone is not sufficient. The candidate must demonstrate not just aptitude, but devotion. They must believe truly and completely in the divinity of the machine. They must be willing to sacrifice everything, family, identity, flesh itself, in service to the Omnissiah. Marin believed. She believed with the fervor of someone who had lived in hell and glimpsed the possibility of transcendence. She believed because she had to believe in something, and the machine god seemed more real, more tangible, than any other deity in the Imperium's vast pantheon. She passed the tests. She was accepted. She left her home world without looking back. The initial training was exactly as Elias's had been, the same data tethers, the same information overload, the same systematic replacement of education with indoctrination. Marin absorbed it eagerly. She memorized the 16 universal laws. She learned to speak in binary cant, the sacred language that turned human thought into something machines could comprehend. And then came the first augmentation. They gave her a choice, not a real choice. The Mechanicus does not deal in real choices, but the appearance of one. She could select which modification to receive first, her hands, her eyes, her respiratory system. She chose her eyes. She told herself it was practical. Enhanced vision would allow her to better serve the Omnissiah, to see the fine details of machinery that organic eyes might miss. But the truth she barely admitted to herself, was that she wanted to keep her hands. Her hands were the last part of her that still felt human. She could still touch things and feel them. She could still feel warmth and cold and texture. She wanted to hold on to that for as long as possible. The surgery was performed in a chamber lit by red lumens, the walls covered in inscriptions of sacred binary. 6 tech priests attended, their own eyes glowing with internal light, their movements synchronized like a single organism with many limbs. They did not sedate her. They never do. Merrin lay on the surgical table, restraints holding her head perfectly still. She recited the litany of the machine to calm herself, each word a small anchor against the fear rising in her chest. The first incision was not painful. They had injected localized anesthetic into the tissue around her eyes. But she felt the pressure of the blade, felt the surgeon's fingers as they carefully separated her eyeball from its socket, severing the optic nerve with a precision that spoke of 10,000 repetitions. She wanted to scream. She wanted to close her eyes, but they were being held open by small metal clamps. She could see the surgeon's hand reaching in, could see the bloodied sphere of her own eye being lifted away, and then the darkness as the optic nerve was cut. She had not expected the darkness. She had thought there would be pain, or discomfort, or the immediate sensation of the new implant. But there was nothing, just absolute darkness, more complete than closing her eyes, because there were no eyes left to close. For 37 seconds she was blind. She counted each one. 37 seconds of pure absence, her visual cortex firing desperately, trying to process signals that were no longer coming. She felt her brain creating hallucinations, phantom images of light and color, anything to fill the void. And then they activated the bionic optics. The world exploded into view, not gradually, not gently, all at once, with a clarity so intense it felt like violence. She could see everything, not just the surgical chamber, but beyond it. She could see through the walls, her new eyes calibrated to multiple spectrums simultaneously. She could see the heat signatures of the tech priests around her. She could see the electromagnetic fields generated by the equipment. She could see individual dust particles floating in the air, could count them if she wanted to. She could see more than any human was meant to see. And her brain, not yet adapted to the new input, began to overload. She seizured on the table. Her body convulsed despite the restraints. Blood ran from her nose, organic blood, still warm, still human. The tech priests did not panic. They had seen this before. They administered chemical stabilizers directly into her bloodstream, compounds that would force her neurology to accept the new input whether it wanted to or not. The seizure stopped, her breathing steadied, her heart rate, monitored by machines that cared more about her survival than any person in the room, returned to acceptable parameters. She opened her new eyes, properly this time with control, and looked at her hands. They were shaking. Still flesh, still hers, still human. But she could see them differently now. She could see the inefficiency of organic tissue, the slight tremor in her fingers, the imperfect circulation of blood through capillaries, the way the muscles moved with wasteful expenditure of energy, friction and heat where a mechanical servo would operate smoothly. For the first time, she saw her own body as the Mechanicus wanted her to see it, as something that needed to be fixed. Merrin served as an acolyte for 3 years before her second augmentation. During that time, she worked in the lower levels of Manufactorum Tertius, the same one where Elias Crane had made his fatal error, though she never knew his name or his story. She tended to machines. She performed basic maintenance rituals. She learned to read the moods of machine spirits, those strange, semi-aware presences that inhabited ancient technology. The Mechanicus taught that machine spirits were fragments of the Omnissiah's consciousness, distributed throughout creation. Merrin learned to believe this, or rather, she learned to stop questioning it, which amounted to the same thing. Her new eyes showed her things no one else could see. She could detect microscopic stress fractures in metal. She could observe the flow of electricity through circuits, watching it move like water through pipes. She could see when a machine was about to fail, sometimes hours before any diagnostic equipment would register the problem. She was good at her work. Exceptionally good. Her superiors noted this in her file. She was marked for advancement. The second augmentation was not her choice. The Mechanicus had determined that her hands, still organic, were limiting her potential. The tremor she had noticed after her eye surgery had never fully stopped. It was minuscule, less than a millimeter of deviation, but her enhanced vision made her acutely aware of it. The inefficiency bothered her, not because she felt inadequate, but because the machines she worked with deserved better. They deserved perfect care, perfect precision, and flesh, no matter how skilled, could not provide that. When the summons came, she accepted without protest. They took both hands at once. It was more efficient that way. The surgery lasted 11 hours. They removed not just her hands, but her forearms up to the elbow, replacing them with mechadendrites, flexible mechanical limbs tipped with an array of tools. Welders, cutters, manipulators of various sizes. Data ports that could interface directly with machine cogitators. The pain was different this time. Worse. The nerve clusters in the arms are denser than those around the eyes. The sensation of amputation, even with localized anesthetic, was overwhelming. Merrin felt her arms being cut away, felt the saw biting through bone, felt the heat of cauterization. She did not scream. Screaming was weakness. Weakness was flesh. Flesh was sin. She recited the litany of the machine. She recited it until the words lost meaning, until they were just sounds, just rhythmic patterns to distract her brain from what was being done to her body. When it was over, when the mechadendrites were attached and activated, she looked down at what had replaced her hands. They were beautiful, polished steel and blessed bronze, inscribed with sacred equations. They moved when she thought about moving them. The interface between her nervous system and the machine seamless, perfect. She tried to touch her own face. The mechadendrite moved to her cheek, but she felt nothing. There was no sensation of touch. The machine could detect pressure, temperature, texture, all of it translated into data that appeared in her field of vision, but she could not feel it. She would never feel anything again. Not the warmth of another person, not the texture of cloth, not the smooth coolness of water running over skin. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself that feeling was inefficient, that data was superior to sensation. She told herself this for 6 months before she stopped needing to opine. The neural drift started subtly. Merrin didn't notice at first. No one does. It began with time. She would start a task, recalibrating a plasma conduit or performing the morning rites on a manufactorum's machine spirit, and then suddenly hours had passed. Not lost hours. She remembered the work. She remembered performing each step of the ritual correctly. But the experience of time itself had become elastic, unreliable. Then came the language shifts. She would be speaking Gothic, the common tongue of the Imperium, and mid-sentence she would switch to binary cant without realizing it. Her fellow tech priests didn't comment. They did the same thing. But when she tried to interact with unaugmented humans, menial workers, servitor tenders, the rare civilian who ventured into the manufactorum, she saw confusion in their eyes. They couldn't understand her anymore. She was speaking a language that only machines and priests could comprehend. The dreams stopped entirely. That should have disturbed her. For 20 years she had dreamed every night, normal dreams, human dreams, the kind that process emotion and memory. Now her sleep state was different. Her biological components would enter a low-power mode, while her mechanical augmentations ran diagnostic cycles. She would wake with detailed knowledge of her own operational status, blood pressure, neural efficiency, mechanical stress tolerances, but no memory of having experienced anything. No dreams, no rest, just maintenance. And then came the morning she couldn't remember her mother's name. She was performing a routine calibration, her mechadendrites moving through the ritual automatically, when the thought occurred to her, had she come from somewhere? She knew intellectually that she must have. She had records, a file somewhere in the Mechanicus archives that listed her place of birth, her family of origin, the world she had left behind. But she couldn't remember any of it. She tried to recall her mother's face. Nothing. Her father. Nothing. Siblings? She thought she might have had a brother, but the memory was like trying to grasp smoke. The harder she reached for it, the more completely it dissipated. She should have been horrified. She should have felt loss, grief, the existential terror of realizing that she was being erased from the inside out. But she felt nothing, just a mild curiosity. A notation in her internal log: memory degradation detected, possible neural pathway deterioration, monitor for further symptoms. She continued her work without pause. At 27, Merrin was promoted to Engine Seer. The ceremony was brief, conducted in binary cant, witnessed by 6 magi whose bodies were so extensively modified that their original gender, age, and appearance were impossible to determine. With the promotion came another requirement, another augmentation. They would take her legs. The justification was practical. The lower manufactorum levels, where engine seers were expected to work, required constant movement through tight spaces, up and down vertical shafts, across machinery that was still operational and dangerously hot. Organic legs were slow. They tired. They could be injured. Mechanical legs never tired. They could be modified with climbing claws, magnetic grips, extendable struts. They were superior in every measurable way. Merrin had walked on her own legs for 27 years. She had learned to walk as a child, had run across the dust plains of her home world, had felt the ground beneath her feet in 1,000 different places. She tried to remember what that felt like. The sensation of walking. She couldn't. The surgery was performed in the same chamber where she had lost her eyes and hands. By now it was familiar, almost comfortable, the restraints, the red lumens, the tech priests moving with their eerie synchronization. They removed both legs at the hip. The amputation took 6 hours. The installation of the mechanical replacements took another 8. When Merrin stood up from the surgical table, she was 14 centimeters taller than she had been. Her new legs were Digiti grade, designed for stability and efficiency rather than aesthetics. They made a soft clicking sound with each step, servos and pistons working in perfect rhythm. She walked across the chamber. The gait was different, mechanical, but efficient. She could sense the floor through pressure sensors in her feet. She knew its composition, its temperature, the exact amount of force she was exerting with each step. But she didn't feel it. She looked down at her body. Mechanical eyes, mechanical hands, mechanical legs. Her torso was still organic, covered in the red robes of the Mechanicus. Approximately 47% of her original body remained. She wondered briefly at what percentage she would stop being human. Then she dismissed the thought. It was irrelevant. She was serving the Omnissiah. That was all that mattered. That was all that had ever mattered. Merrin's first assignment as an engine seer took her to the outer manufactorums of Styges 8, where the largest machines operated. These were not simple assembly lines or small forges. These were cathedral-sized complexes where titans were built, where void ship components were manufactured, where ammunition that could destroy cities was produced in quantities that beggared imagination. She was assigned to maintain Titan power cores, plasma reactors the size of buildings, each one containing enough energy to power a small city, or, if catastrophically released, destroy one. The work was dangerous. Not to her. Her mechanical body could withstand radiation and heat that would kill an unaugmented human in seconds, but to the millions of workers who depended on these reactors functioning correctly. She worked alone most of the time. The Mechanicus had long ago determined that engine seers worked more efficiently without the distraction of other people. She would spend weeks in the reactor chambers, performing maintenance rituals, communing with the machine spirits, ensuring that every component operated within sacred tolerances. She was good at it. Exceptionally good. In 3 years, not a single reactor under her care experienced an unexpected shutdown. Her efficiency ratings were in the top percentile across the entire Forge world. Her superiors were pleased. They added commendations to her file. They began to discuss her potential for further advancement. Perhaps in time she could become a Magos. Perhaps she could oversee entire manufactorum complexes. All she needed was a few more modifications. The lungs went next. The air in the reactor chambers was toxic. Ionized particles, chemical residue, heat that would scorch organic tissue. She had been wearing a respirator, but it was cumbersome, inefficient. They replaced her lungs with a closed-cycle filtration system. No more breathing. No more air moving in and out of her chest. Just mechanical bellows that oxygenated her remaining blood without the vulnerability of organic tissue. She didn't miss breathing. She couldn't remember what it had felt like anyway. Then the spine. Her organic spine was a weak point, vulnerable to injury, prone to degenerative conditions. They replaced it with an articulated metal column, stronger than bone, more flexible than any organic structure. Then the organs. One by one, over the course of 6 years, they replaced everything that made her biologically alive. Her heart became a mechanical pump. Her stomach became a chemical processor. Her intestines were removed entirely. She no longer needed to eat food, only to consume nutrient paste that could be directly converted to energy. By 35, Marin Lathis was less than 10% organic. Only her brain remained substantially unchanged, and even that had been augmented with cogitator implants that increased her processing speed and memory capacity. She looked in the mirror one morning, not a real mirror, but a polished metal surface in her maintenance chamber, and saw what she had become. A machine, with a face, barely. Her skin was pale, almost gray, stretched over a skull that had been reinforced with metal plating. Her eyes glowed with internal light. Her movements were precise, mechanical, lacking any of the small inefficiencies that marked something as alive. She tried to remember what she had looked like before the modifications, before the Mechanicus. She couldn't. She had photos in her archive, images captured during her initial intake, showing a young woman with dark hair and brown eyes and a smile that suggested she believed in something. But when she looked at those images, she didn't recognize the person in them. It was like looking at a stranger, someone who happened to share her name, but was otherwise completely unfamiliar. She felt nothing looking at those images. No nostalgia, no loss, no sense of connection to the person she had been. That person was gone, had been gone for years, maybe decades, and in her place was something that served the machine god with perfect, emotionless efficiency. The error occurred on the 273rd day of Marin's 37th year. She was performing a routine maintenance cycle on Reactor 774, a plasma core that powered 3 entire manufactorum levels. The ritual was complex, but familiar. She had performed it hundreds of times, thousands of times, maybe. She didn't keep count anymore. Time had become strange, measured not in days or years, but in maintenance cycles completed, in efficiency ratings achieved, in machine spirits successfully appeased. The ritual required precise timing. Each step had to be performed in exact sequence, with the proper prayers recited at the proper intervals. The machine spirit of a plasma reactor was ancient and temperamental. It required respect, devotion, perfect execution. Marin began the ritual at 3 Thur, as she always did. She checked the pressure valves, she recalibrated the containment fields, she anointed the sacred components with blessed oils, she spoke the prayers in binary cant, each word precisely modulated, each pause exactly measured. Everything was proceeding correctly. And then at 3:47:22, she had a thought. It was not part of the ritual. It was not a technical consideration or a procedural requirement. It was just a thought. She wondered what her mother's name had been. It was irrelevant. It was inefficient. It was a malfunction of her cognitive processes, a random neural firing that should have been suppressed by her augmentations. But the thought persisted. She tried to dismiss it. She refocused on the ritual, on the prayer she was reciting, on the valve she was calibrating. But her mind, the small organic fragment that remained, kept returning to the question. What was her name? And in that moment of distraction, her mechadendrite applied 0.3% more torque than specified to a calibration valve. 0.3%. It was nothing. It was barely measurable. In any reasonable system, it would have been well within tolerances. But plasma reactors are not reasonable systems. They are volatile, unstable, containing forces that want desperately to explode outward. They are held in check by magnetic fields calibrated to tolerances measured in millionths of a degree. The valve, stressed beyond its sacred specification, developed a microscopic fracture. The reactor did not fail immediately. Plasma reactors never do. They degrade slowly, the imbalance growing over hours, over days, until the machine spirit can no longer contain the forces within. Marin completed the ritual. She performed every remaining step correctly. She finished at 4:11, exactly 92 minutes and 11 seconds after beginning, as the sacred patterns required. She logged the maintenance as complete. Her efficiency rating remained perfect. She did not detect the fracture. Her sensors, calibrated to detect major anomalies, did not register something so small. The machine spirit, unable to communicate its distress in any way she could perceive, continued to function. Everything seemed fine. Merrin moved to her next assignment, Reactor 775, and began the ritual there. Behind her, in Reactor 774, the fracture grew. The reactor failed 13 days later. Merrin was not present when it happened. She was 3 levels away, performing maintenance on a different system. But she felt it. Every tech priest on the Forge world felt it. The explosion was not immediate. First came the alarms, machine screams that echoed through the Manufactorum, warning signals that only augmented ears could fully process. Then came the tremor, the shaking of metal and stone as thousands of tons of machinery began to tear themselves apart. Then came the light. Plasma, freed from its containment, burned through the reactor chamber in seconds. It vaporized everything it touched. Steel, stone, flesh. The temperature in the immediate vicinity of the breach reached levels comparable to the surface of a star. 2,000 workers died in the first 10 seconds. Another 5,000 died when the reactor's secondary systems failed, sending cascading failures through 3 Manufactorum levels. Support structures collapsed. Automated defenses, designed to contain breaches, activated too late. Bulkheads sealed, trapping thousands more in chambers that were rapidly losing atmosphere. Merrin stopped her current ritual mid-sequence. She accessed the Manufactorum network, downloading status reports directly into her cogitator implants. She saw the casualty estimates. She saw the damage projections. She saw which reactor had failed. 774, the one she had serviced 13 days ago. She searched her memory logs. Perfect, mechanical records of every action she had taken, every prayer she had recited, every valve she had calibrated. She found the moment. The thought that should not have been there. The valve that had been torqued 0.3% beyond specification. The error was hers. She felt nothing. Not guilt, not horror, not even professional concern. Just a clinical acknowledgement of causality. Action and consequence. Error and result. She reported to the Emergency Coordination Center. Other tech priests were already there, their mechadendrites moving in synchronized patterns as they worked to contain the damage, to seal the breach, to prevent the failure from spreading to other systems. No one spoke to her. Communication happened through data tethers, information flowing directly between augmented minds. She received her assignment. Proceed to Reactor 774's remains and begin recovery operations. She complied. The reactor chamber was gone, not damaged, gone. Where it had stood was now a crater. The walls melted and fused, the floor collapsed into the levels below. Heat still radiated from the wreckage, enough to kill any unaugmented human instantly. Merrin walked to the edge of the crater. Her sensors detected temperatures of 847 degrees Kelvin. Lethal radiation levels. Toxic gas concentrations. None of it could harm her anymore. She was protected by her augmentations, by the machine components that had replaced her vulnerable flesh. She looked down into the crater and saw what remained of 2,000 people. They were not recognizable as people anymore. Just carbon, shadows burned into metal, organic matter reduced to its component atoms. She should have felt something. Horror, remorse, the weight of knowing that her error, however small, had caused this. But she felt nothing, just information, data, status updates scrolling across her field of vision, casualty counts, resource loss calculations, projected repair timelines. The dead were just numbers. The destruction was just inefficiency. She was supposed to feel something. She knew that. Somewhere in the small organic part of her brain, there was still enough human consciousness to recognize that this was wrong. That she was wrong. That the absence of emotion in the face of such catastrophe was itself catastrophic. But knowing she should feel something is not the same as feeling it. She could not mourn, she could not grieve, she could not even regret. She was exactly what the Mechanicus had made her, efficient, logical, and completely empty. The Mechanicus investigation was thorough and merciless. Every component of the failed reactor was analyzed. Every maintenance log was reviewed. Every tech priest who had worked on 774 in the past standard year was interrogated. They found the fracture. They traced it back to the calibration valve. They reviewed Marin's maintenance logs and found the error, 0.3%. In any other context, it would have been considered acceptable. In any other system, it would have been within tolerances. But plasma reactors do not allow for acceptable errors. They demand perfection, or they destroy everything around them. Marin was summoned before a tribunal of magi. They sat in a chamber carved from solid stone, their bodies barely recognizable as human. One was entirely mechanical, except for a brain suspended in a glass cylinder. Another was so old that its original form was impossible to determine, just a mass of augmentations that had been added over centuries, each modification building on the last until the original body was lost somewhere in the machine. They did not speak. They transmitted data directly into Marin's neural interface. She received it all: the evidence, the analysis, the indictment. They showed her the moment of her error with perfect precision. They showed her the thought that had distracted her, pulled from her own memory logs by technomats who specialized in neural excavation. What was her name? 4 words. A moment of human weakness, and 2,000 people had died because of it. The Magi deliberated for exactly 0.73 seconds. Their judgment came as pure data, cold and final. Marin Lathis had demonstrated insufficient devotion to the Omnissiah. Her cognitive processes had been compromised by residual organic sentiment. Her error had resulted in catastrophic resource loss and damage to sacred machinery. She was to be corrected. The remaining organic components of her brain, the parts that still thought in words, that still experienced something resembling consciousness, would be removed. Her cognitive functions would be transferred entirely to mechanical systems. She would continue to serve the Mechanicus, but as a shell, a program, a subroutine running on biological hardware. She would become what they called a tech thrall. Not quite a servitor, those were made from criminals and the brain dead. But not quite a tech priest either, something in between. A consciousness reduced to pure function, stripped of everything except the ability to serve. Marin received this judgment without protest. She could not have protested even if she wanted to. The part of her that might have objected, that might have felt fear or anger or desperation, had been dead for years. She simply acknowledged the order and prepared for the final surgery. They brought her to the surgical chamber one final time. The same red lumens, the same restraints, the same tech priests who had performed every previous modification, their mechadendrites ready, their prayers prepared. But this time was different. This time, they would take the last piece of her that was still human. Marin lay on the table. She did not resist. Resistance was illogical. The judgment had been made. The modification would proceed. That was simply how the system worked. They opened her skull with practiced efficiency. They exposed the gray matter beneath, the last organic remnant of who she had been. Her brain, augmented and modified over decades, but still fundamentally biological, still capable in theory of thought and emotion and all the inefficient processes that marked something as alive. The tech priests worked in silence, their movements coordinated through their own neural networks. They began to disconnect the organic tissue from its mechanical support systems, preparing to excise it entirely. And in that moment, in the last seconds before the final cut, Marin Lathis had one final thought. She remembered. Not everything. The memories were still gone, lost to years of neural pruning and augmentation. But she remembered the feeling. Not the specific sensation of being human, but the knowledge that she had once felt something, that she had once been something other than this. She had been a girl who looked at machines and saw divinity. She had been an acolyte who believed in ascension. She had been a person who had willingly given up everything, her body, her memories, her capacity for emotion, because she thought she was becoming something greater. And now, at the very end, she understood the truth. She had not ascended. She had simply been dismantled, piece by piece, surgery by surgery, modification by modification. The Mechanicus had not elevated her. It had erased her, replacing each component of her humanity with mechanical alternatives until nothing remained but a program that still thought it was alive. The promise of transcendence had been a lie, not a deliberate lie. The Magi who had taught her truly believed it, but a lie nonetheless. There was no union with the machine god waiting at the end of this path. There was only absence, only the hollow emptiness of a consciousness that had been reduced to pure function. She tried to speak, to warn someone, to leave some record of what she had realized, but she had no voice. Her vocal cords had been replaced years ago with a mechanical voxcaster. And even if she could speak, there was no one who would listen. The tech priests performing the surgery would not understand. They were too far gone themselves, their own minds already fragmented beyond recovery. The scalpel descended. The blade cut through the last neural connections between her organic brain and her mechanical body. And in the instant before the final cut, before her consciousness dissolved into nothing, Marin Lathis had one last coherent thought. This is worse than death, because death would have ended. Death would have been final, merciful, complete. But this slow erasure stretched across decades, this deliberate destruction of self performed with religious devotion, this never ended. Somewhere in the Mechanicus, her body would continue to function. Her mechanical components would continue to serve. But the person she had been, the consciousness that had once looked at stars and wondered and hoped and feared, would be gone. And no one would remember that she had existed. No one would mourn. No one would even know that something precious had been lost. The cut was made, the organic tissue was removed, the mechanical systems took over completely. The thing that had been Marin Lathis stood up from the surgical table. It registered its operational status, all systems functioning within normal parameters. It received its new assignment, maintenance operations in Manufactorum level Gamma 7. It complied without thought, without question, without anything that could be called consciousness. The Mechanicus logged the procedure as successful. Another tech priest corrected, another servant brought into perfect alignment with the will of the Omnissiah. Production continued without interruption. On a mining world in Segmentum Obscurus, a boy named Tarek watches tech priests repair a broken excavator. He sees their mechanical bodies, their impossible precision, their immunity to the poisons that kill his neighbors. He thinks, I want to be like them. He does not understand what that means. No one does at first. He will apply to the Mechanicus. He will pass the tests. He will receive his first augmentation and believe it is enlightenment. He will receive his second and his third and his 10th, each time telling himself that he is ascending, becoming greater, approaching the divine. And piece by piece, over decades, he will be dismantled. Not killed, not destroyed, dismantled. Every component of his humanity carefully removed and replaced with mechanical alternatives, performed with such meticulous care that he will never quite realize when he stopped being a person and became a function. Somewhere on a forge world, a new acolyte arrives. She is brilliant, devoted, eager to serve. She has no idea what she is volunteering for. The Mechanicus will welcome her. They will teach her. They will modify her. They will praise her devotion as she gives up everything that makes her who she is. And when she finally realizes the truth, when she finally understands that she is not ascending but disappearing, it will be too late. The parts of her that could resist will already be gone. This is the pattern. This has been the pattern for 10,000 years, and it will continue for 10,000 more. Because the Imperium needs the machines to work, and the machines need someone to tend them. And the tech priests, in their devotion, have volunteered to be that bridge, to sacrifice their humanity, their consciousness, their souls, if such things exist, in service to the Omnissiah. They do this willingly. They do this with joy. They believe, truly and completely, that they are blessed. And perhaps they are right. Perhaps the machine god watches them and is pleased. Or perhaps the machine god is just the machines themselves, and machines do not care about devotion. They simply function. They simply consume what is offered to them, metal and flesh and consciousness, and they transform it into whatever they need. And they need more. Always more. The Mechanicus will provide, as it always has, as it always will. M41956, classification, proscribed. We are the servants of the Omnissiah. We give our flesh that the machines may live. We give our minds that the machines may think. We give our souls that the machines may endure. We do not die, we are corrected. We do not fail, we are recalibrated. We do not question, we are optimized. The flesh is weak, the flesh is sin. The machine